Happy birthday, America. This is Jamie from the channel Read Brucey. I come to you today to give you a wrap up for the month of June, and I want to, it's going to be quite a long one, so bear with me just a minute while we go through it. I participated in one readathon, and I co-hosted and participated in one readathon for the month of June. So I participated in the Red, White, and June readathon. I'll put a picture of the graphic on the screen. And then I co-hosted and participated in a Picnic in June readathon for all of us Christian booktubers who have June birthdays. And that had to do with established by Lucy from the Lucy Chronicles, and Kay from Kay's Little Library, Jamie from the Kansan Reader, myself at Read Brucey, and Lindsay on Instagram, Lindsay Lou Lemus. We're all involved in that readathon, and I'll also put a picture of the graphic on the screen for that. We appreciate everybody who was involved in that one. It was a whole lot of fun. So like I said, I co-hosted that one, but I also participated in the Red, White, and June. So I will share the infographics, the graphics for those. So let's get into it. What did I read? I read 26 things altogether. And that includes Bible studies and the Declaration of Independence. So some of what I read was physical. Some of what I read was electronic. Some of what I read was by listening on Audible or audio. So let's just kind of go down the list. The last thing I read, but definitely not the least because I thoroughly enjoyed it, was The Last Freddie and Grace Mystery from Pepper Basham, and that is The Bachelor Spy. I gave it 5 stars. I do not have a physical copy of this book, so I will be putting a copy of it on the screen. I loved this book. Freddie is at war in this book. Book takes place during the Great War. So at the beginning of this book, he's at war. Grace has started a convalescent home for returning soldiers, and things are going awry at the house. There's things going missing. Cousin Stephen Blake shows up. Things are just a little bit wonky with him. She knows something's up, and she's not quite sure what's going on there. And that's where we stand. That's where the mystery of this book starts to take place. The faith content in this book was just off the charts. I love this book. I would say this book rates up there, right up there with the first book in the series. The middle books were good, but this one is right up there with the Mistletoe Countess for me. I loved it. And technically I'm going in reverse order. So Chocolate Dreams was just a little rom-com I picked up, or I say rom-com, it wasn't a comedy, it was just a contemporary romance that I picked up on the very last day of the month. It was about someone who worked for a chocolate company. I gave it 3 stars. It was a pretty good book. It wasn't extraordinary, but it was okay. It was about a woman who was forced to kind of into caring for her blind nephew. And in the process, she meets a guy who is agnostic, but is tutoring her nephew and trying to get him up to speed in school. And she, in the process, begins to teach him about God, this tutor about God, and they're attracted to each other. So it wasn't a bad story. It just, like I said, it wasn't extraordinary. So that was Chocolate Dreams, and that was my next to the last book of the month. The next book I read before that, I guess, was to finish, let me put it that way, would be 1776. Okay, so I do have a copy of that. I pretty much worked on this book all month, and as you know, this book is by David McCullough, and this is a nonfiction book talking about the year of that the revolution or the Revolutionary War started. So it basically just tells of the story of that particular year of 1976. It really doesn't talk much about, it's not about the beginning of the revolution per se. It really just tells about the year of 1976. Okay, so it wasn't exactly what I really didn't know what I was expecting going into that book, but that's what it did. Now, I gave it 4 stars just for what it did. Okay, the book I finished right before that was this shorter biography of Alexander Hamilton. I am still working on the big chunky Alexander Hamilton biography. I'm going to try to continue reading on it, hopefully finish it, before the end of the summer. But this biography is written by Martha Brockenbrough. I probably am not saying that right. Okay. I gave this one 3 stars. It was okay. I mean, it was not extraordinary. It was pretty brief, obviously. I did like the formatting of this. It was definitely written for a younger audience. I like the aesthetics of it for sure. It's written to look antique, so that was pretty cool. I did like that part of the book. Okay, so that was unique. The book I finished right before that was my dystopian book for the readathon, for my a Picnic in June readathon, and that was The Wall, okay, by Brian Penn. Now, I had some beef with this book. I mean, I gave it 3 stars, and I will continue the series, okay? But there were some things I disliked about this book. It was kind of a mix between The Hunger Games and books like The Red Queen, okay? And I can see that. It also reminded me a little bit of Nadine Brande's A Time to Die. But it had some it touts itself as Christian. Like it considers it's a Christian dystopian book. But many times the characters were using curse words. Now I get it. There were situations in this book that probably would have had me cursing as well. However, I believe you can show cursing without actually cursing. Some of my book friends and I had this discussion. Okay, so I had that problem with this book. So, that took it down a notch for me. In the beginning of the book also was a little slow for me. It took me a minute to get into this book. But the ending of this book is going to make me read the rest, at least the next book in the series. So, that being said, I will be continuing the book. So, we'll see what happens in the next book in the series. The book before that I finished was Bible Translations for Everyone, A Guide to Finding a Bible That is Right for You by Tim Wildsmith. I just love learning about Bible translations and all the things that go with that. And so I had picked up this book by Tim Wildsmith. If you don't know who Tim Wildsmith is, he is on YouTube. He reviews Bibles. It's pretty extensive channel, reviewing all kinds of Bibles. He's pretty knowledgeable about what he does. So if you get a chance, check out his channel. His book is awesome. I gave it 5 stars. Talks about the major. He can't cover all the Bible English translations, but he talks about the major ones. So that was a pretty good little book. Okay, so the next book that I finished, and this was just a little graphic novel that I heard Liv from Liv's Library, I think is the name of her channel. She influenced me on this book. She talked about it. It's called Kindred Dragons. And when I heard her talking about it, I was like, man, I got to check that book out. It's just a little graphic novel about a girl who lives on Prince Edward Island who wants to bond with a dragon. And it's kind of a mix between Anna Green Gables and How to Train Your Dragon. The artwork is astounding, and the story is just adorable. So here's an example of the artwork. Just very, very cute. So I read that and gave that one 4 stars. Okay. So the book before that I finished was book 2 in the Song of the Adriel series. I hope I'm saying that right. By Jennifer Kronf. Okay, so book 1 in this series is The Scarlet Star, which I know you've heard me talk about in this series, and that is a Beauty and the Beast story that it's part Beauty and the Beast, part Esther retelling, but also spiritual warfare. This one continues a little bit with that Beauty and the Beast / Esther feel, but also throws in King David feels, but gender swapped. Okay. So really, you really lose the Esther so much. So it's really more King David versus Esther more than the Beauty and the Beast. But it's just marvelous. I mean, I love this series. Jennifer Kronf does a really wonderful job. So I gave this one 5 stars. Okay. I wished I could get more people reading this series. I love it. Absolutely love that series. Okay, YouTube. All right, next I want to talk about the fact that I read the Declaration of Independence and Patrick Henry's speech from this old textbook that I had picked up for $1 at our library one day. So I did read that. Okay, so I also wanted to show you that one day while I was at Walmart, I found this little book of the Constitution and other documents. It has the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, Patrick Henry's speech, Washington's first inaugural speech, the Emancipation Proclamation, Gettysburg Address, Star Spangled Banner, Our Flag, the Pledge of Allegiance, I Have a Dream, Wisdom, Wit, and Warnings. So this book was $2.50, so it was a good little book to pick up. So I just thought I would share that with you guys. Okay. So the next book I want to talk about that I read is How to Read a Book. Now, this book I had started a couple of years ago, but I had to go back and start it over because I was from In Search of Wonders read along. And I will say this book is very academic and very scientific, you might say. It's very dense. Parts of it were a little bit hard to understand. When I first heard about this book, I was working through the book called How to Read Your Bible for All It's Worth, and they were talking about this book. And so then I decided I needed to read this book. And I can understand why it would be important. A lot of it does not apply to fiction. There are parts of it that apply to reading fiction, but very much of it applies to reading like scientific books, philosophy, and books like that. So that is that book. I gave that one 3 stars. Okay. The next book I read was Flame Theory by C.F.E. Black. This is a book about dragons mixed with Harry Potter, mixed with dragon riding, mixed with horse racing, but with dragons. I love this book. This was a great book. I only gave it 4 stars because there were a couple things that kind of bugged me just slightly. One being the ending. The ending, major cliffhanger, and we're not getting another book for a year, so no. I just couldn't quite give it 5 stars. So 4 stars it was. But the series title will be called Bloodlines, so watch for it. I definitely think you should pick this one up. You won't regret it if you like fantasy, clean fantasy specifically. Okay. The book I read after that was was Conspiracy by Colleen Coble. This was book 3 of the Sanctuary series and the final book in that series. Of course, this is tied to Colleen Coble and Rick Akers series, the Tupelo Grove series. It's kind of interconnected slightly. I enjoyed the series. It was a solid 4-star series. It's had a overall arching mystery throughout the whole series, and then each book has kind of had its own little mystery. I mean, this book wrapped up this series well. There was nothing wrong with it. There was just some things that bugged me slightly. This is set in South Alabama on the coast. I just feel like Colleen Coble did not research the area very well. There were some things that I'm like, do you really research the area you're writing about? Because they wouldn't do that in South Alabama on the coast. Just that kind of thing. Because I live in Louisiana, I live in a coastal area myself, and just some of the things that I know, I just know. No, we wouldn't do that. It's very similar to the same area. Okay, moving on. I don't want to get on that soapbox. Moving on to Wormwood Abbey, which is book 1 of The Secrets of Ormdale by Christina Bear. This is set in an abbey in England, Victorian era, I would say. A vicar inherits his family abbey, so he takes his family and he moves, they go to check out this Abby he inherits, and they get up there and it's not all what they think it's going to be, and he gets up there and there ends up being dragons and all kinds of family secrets. This is a really short book. I would say it's not middle grade, but I'd say YA. I would classify this as YA. Some people would. I've heard somebody say this wasn't Christian fiction, but it was written by a Christian. But I would classify this one as Christian. I don't. I don't know why you wouldn't classify this one as Christian. I mean, the dad's a vicar. He prays. He leads them in church services. So yeah, I would classify this as Christian. Just a cute little book. I can't wait to continue the series. I rated that one 4 stars, and I will put a picture up here. The next book I want to talk about is Part of Your World, which is book 2 in the Once Upon a Time in Texas series by Karen Whittemire. As you can guess from the title, that is a Little Mermaid retelling that is set in Galveston. Perfect setting to me for a Little Mermaid retelling. Okay. Muriel, our Little Mermaid character, is a excellent swimmer, but she's been forbidden to go into the water because she got in trouble with her dad. And she is standing on the edge of the water, wishing she could be in the water, when she sees a guy out on his sailboat get hit with the boom of his boat. And so then she realizes she's the only one around that can rescue him. So she jumps in, swims out, rescues him, and then, of course, disappears. Of course, he wants to know who she is, and then she wants to know who he is. She finds out who he is and realizes the only way she can meet him is to go to this matchmaker, who turns out to be a super oily character. Of course, your matchmaker is your Ursula character. And I don't want to say much more than that, but just a wonderfully written version of The Little Mermaid. Okay, moving on. The next book I want to talk about is As Sure as the Dawn, which is book 3 in the Mark of the Lion trilogy by Francine Rivers. I gave this one 4 stars. Okay. I enjoyed this book. I didn't love this book as much as I loved the first 2 books in the series. It was still a good book. Like I said, gave the other 2 5 stars, gave this one 4 stars. So there's nothing wrong with it. It just didn't hit to me like book 1 and 2 did. This is Artrides' story. So Artrides is the gladiator that we first meet in book 1, who has an affair with Julian Valero, or I think is their last name, from book 1, 2, has the child. They have a child together. He decides he wants the child. He goes after the woman who's adopted him, brings her into his home, and then they end up having to flee Rome, and they go back towards his homeland. And that's kind of the story, or not Rome, but Ephesus is where they are. And then they go to Rome, and then on to Germania. Okay, and so that's the story. And eventually, he finds his way to God, but he's so very hard-headed, and I want to. He just makes you want to beat your head against the wall at some points. You're like, would you stop being so dang hard-headed? Okay, that's the kind of person he is. Okay, moving on. The next book I want to talk about, and this is a book I've been working on just a little bit at a time for months, reading the Bible better. This is a little book and it's called A Short Guide to Reading the Bible Better, okay, by George Guthrie. And gave this one 4 stars. It was just a little book I picked up at Ollie's one day, and there's little tips and tricks about reading the Bible. I just finally sat down and finished it during the month of June. Okay, just not much else I can say about that. Just gives you tips and tricks about being more engaged in reading the Bible. All right, the next book I want to talk about is For Liberty and Love from Shannon Hatfield. This is book 1 from Petticoats and Patriots, which is a multi-author series that have to do with this locket that gets handed around from person to person, has to do with, and I think eventually it ends up back into the hands of a modern day couple. But in this particular book, Lucy lives in Philadelphia. This is, like I said, book 1 in the series. Her dad is a goldsmith, silversmith, and one day someone comes into the shop seemingly being chased by all the unsavory individuals, and she somehow leaves this locket. And when she leaves this locket, Lucy realizes she's got to get this locket back to her. And this starts this process where Lucy essentially becomes the spy for the Patriots. And in the process of becoming a spy, she meets this guy, and I can't remember his name. Lord help me. I read too many books. I want to say it was Micah, but I might be wrong. And we also meet her little brother Theo, which they posted a little short book for Theo just yesterday, so that was really cute. I'll try to put a picture of his book up as well. I really enjoyed this little book. This was a cute little story for Liberty and Love. I gave it 3 stars. Probably should have given it 4, now that I think about it some more. Right, moving on to The Belle of Chatham by Laura France. Thank you, M, for my pretty copy. Won this in the drawing from the Be Happy Readathon. This was set in the village of Chatham, New Jersey. Okay, I had to think where it was. And we have 2 sisters, Maybelle and Coraline Bohannon. Okay, and they have a couple of brothers as well. Well, their home becomes a place where their brother brings some of the Patriot Army to stay there. Well, one of the sisters, Coraline, is in love with a British soldier. Okay. Maybelle falls in love with a Patriot soldier. And eventually they get married. But what is going to happen with the sister and the British soldier? And so that's what this story is about. There were a couple of problems I had with this story. One is I got really frustrated, and I still gave it 4 stars because it was a good solid story, but I did get frustrated I got frustrated a couple of times with the Maybelle, which is I think the right one, the one that was married to the Patriot. Why didn't you turn your sister in and at least tell your brother what was going on? And then Laura France tended to jump from scene to scene, like she would skip moments in time. Like 1 minute you were in this time, and then you would skip 2 weeks ahead, or skip from one person to the next without any warning. And that was a little disconcerting sometimes. So otherwise, it was a solid story. This is only my 2nd book by Laura France. I mean, definitely will be reading more from Laura. So, good job there. The next book I read, or that I want to talk about reading, is Ashes to Ashes by Hannah Hood Lacero, I think is how you say her name. Sorry. This is Legacy of Vigilance, Book 1. And I can tell that there are some books before this from like a tie-in series, or I could tell. And I do want to go back and read this series, but this one was set in Pensacola, which is why I picked it up, because I was looking for like a beach read set in that area. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It has to do with like a family history. Um, the girl is being chased. Essentially, she's being looked for by some unsavory individuals, and this whole family basically steps in to save her. Okay, and all these family members have like law enforcement type jobs. All the brothers, her stepdad, and his brothers all have like law enforcement type work. All right, so I gave that book 4 stars. Moving on to 20 Something Else by Stephanie Mack. I gave this book 4 stars. I'll put a picture up here. This was such a unique book, and I really didn't know what to expect going into this book, but I really enjoyed it. This girl is turning 40. She's kind of discouraged with her marriage and her kids. Everything's just kind of not hitting rock bottom, but just she's overwhelmed, I guess would be a good way to set it. So her friends are having a pickleball tournament in her honor, and she gets hit in the face with this pickleball. And when she gets hit in the face, she gets sent to this room, I guess would be, where she gets a chance to live her life several times over without her kids and her husband. And she goes back through several, and it's hard to explain. She gets to go back to all these different years of her lives. And then after when she's done, then she gets to come back, and then she gets to go to another year. She does this several times, so she finds her way back. When she's decided she is ready to go back, she has to figure out a way to get back home. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. There was a redemption arc. I mean, the faith is not like over the top, but it is there. I mean, they do go to church. I say that it's not over the top, but it is, because she has to figure out what she needs to do, to get her life right. So it's there. It is definitely there. Okay. I gave this book 4 stars. I mean, it had some things that could have been better, I think, but overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. There were some relationships I think that I had a little bit of a problem with, but overall, I really enjoyed it. All right, moving on. The next book I want to talk about was Ink and Ivy by Ashley Willingham. Now, I was on the launch team for this book, so I did get a free copy of this book. Now, I bought the paperback copy, but I did originally review this book, you know, because I was on the launch team. But I thoroughly loved this book, and it's rounded up to Goodreads as a 5-star, but I probably gave it more like a 4.5 star. This is a cozy fantasy, Christian cozy fantasy, I guess would be how you say it. Ivy Fairwood is an orphan who's been raised by this town, essentially because her parents have left her there in this world where humans have invaded this fantasy area. I say invaded, they have come and brought the gospel to this fantasy world. And then when all the humans are gone, the crown has tried to bring all the humans to the capital. Well, Ivy didn't want to go, so she hid in this town. Okay. So she's grown now, and she's wanting to start. She's a half dryad, half human, I might say. And so she wants to start an apothecary. Well, she wakes up one morning, and the building she wants to rent has been bought by somebody. She goes to take a welcome basket to this, even though she doesn't feel like welcoming somebody new. She goes to take this welcome basket for the town welcome committee. And when she gets down there, she's rudely met by this guy. And then, of course, when he's rude to her, she's rude back. And so begins this relationship. So then, right after that, she starts getting letters from an anonymous admirer. So we have two kind of concepts going on here. One that kind of feels Romeo and Juliet, not Romeo and Juliet, Pride and Prejudice. And then we also have a You've Got Mail kind of vibe going on. Okay. So, very unique concept. Lots of scripture, lots of Pride and Prejudice vibes, but set in a fantasy world. So it's very interesting. There are some things that were kind of strange. It was kind of weird in some ways to have the direct quotes of scripture. I'm not saying I didn't like it, because like I said, I really loved it. Also found that sometimes the quotes were almost too directly quoted from Pride and Prejudice. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird about that. Okay. So that being said, great writing, great book. Can't wait for book 2. All right. Moving on. The next book was Head in the Clouds by Karen Whittemire. This is a standalone book. It was a 4-star for me. This is about a girl who she's a teacher. She falls in love with this traveling sales guy. She thinks that he loves her. She doesn't understand why he's not going to marry her. So she thinks it's just because he can't stay where she is. So she follows him to Fort Worth. She gets to Fort Worth and realizes he is married. So then she sees something about a job, goes and applies for this job. And when she takes this job, she realizes that this this job's way out in the middle of Texas, and she goes and takes this job for this guy and for his daughter. Now, this man, it's really his adopted daughter, and this little girl has had some trauma in her life, and so she doesn't talk. But this girl begins to work her magic, and it's just an amazing story. Okay, so it's got some heaviness to it. I mean, it's a heavy book. It's not just a light fluffy read. So, but it's so well done and such a great book. Our novella that I picked up was Genevieve Maurick's The Lion of Philippi, which is a Generations of Faith novella. And this is just a novella about, don't even get me to lie about this guy's name, but it's a story of a guy who was a fighter in Philippi, but eventually he goes to work for Lydia, or Lydia finds him essentially dying, and she brings him to work for her and essentially saves his life. We know eventually he's going to marry a character from another book. And so that is, and so this was, like I said, just a novella. And I gave this one 4 stars. Like I said, it's just a novella, so it wasn't very long. So moving on. The next book I want to talk about, and I did have a physical copy from the library, but I took it back. This one is The Brunswick by Callie Murray. This is a World War II story, or right before World War II. This was set kind of in Vienna and in Georgia. Okay. It has to do with a hotel turned general store and all these people that are escaping Austria, and they send these kids to Georgia to the hotel to be saved from the war. And so, without getting in too much detail, that is the storyline of that one. Okay, I gave this one 4 stars. World War II stories are kind of, I think they're overdone. Y'all have heard me say that before, but I really thoroughly enjoyed this one because I thought it was a unique premise. Okay. And so then the last one that I want to talk about was just a little kids I Survived book. And this one was I Survived the American Revolution of 1776 by Lauren Tarshis. This is just exactly what it says. It was a story of a kid who got caught in the American Revolution of 1776 and his story. And I gave this one 4 stars. And that's it. That is what I read. For the picnic in June, I had picked the prompts for Lindsay. I was going to do pasta, and I had planned to read Sure as the Dawn for that prompt. For me, I was going to do the beach prompt, and I was going to do Ashes for Ashes, or Ashes to Ashes. For Lucy's prompt, I was going to do pandas, and I was going to read Head in the Clouds. For Jamie from the Kansan Reader, I was going to do Wormwood Abbey. And for Kay, I was going to do the Hamilton biography. So how did I do? Let's check it out. Did I get all of those read? And I will put my completed board up here. I actually almost got a blackout. Not quite, but I almost got a blackout. I ended up reading way more than those. So for Lindsay's row, let's look. For Lindsay's row, ended up reading What Are You Eating? As Sure as the Dawn. For What Is the Setting? Conspiracy. What Animals Do You See? Kindred Dragons. What Book Did You Bring? Belle of Chatham. What Are You Doing for Bible Study? I worked on Faithful in the Noise, which I did not talk about that earlier. I did complete a Bible study over First Timothy during the month of June. So in my column, I read Chocolate Dreams. For What Are You Eating? What's the Setting? I read Ashes to Ashes. What Animals Do You See? I read The Brunswick. I'm gonna think about that. I don't know why I put that there. It had The Color. What books did you bring? That was the dystopian prompt. I did The Wall. And then what else are you doing? Having tea. So I did Ink and Ivy for that one because tea is a big part of that book. So for Lucy's row, what are you eating? I did 20 something else for that prompt. What's the setting? I did I survived. What's the setting? I did I survived. What animals do you see? Was pandas. I did Head in the Clouds. What books did you bring? I didn't get one for that one. What else are you doing? I did Part of Your World for that one. So Jay's potatoes, I didn't get anything for. So what's the setting? I did the Gold Maiden. What animals do you see? I did Wormwood Abbey. What book did you bring? Was Dragon Fantasy. I did Flame Theory. What else are you doing? I did For Liberty and Love. So then for K, I didn't get anything for baked goods. What's the setting? I did The Lion of Philippi. What animals do you see? I did The Bachelor Spy. For Regency Romance, I didn't get anything. And then for the last prompt was about writing. I did the Hamilton biography. So, and then I didn't get to any of the favorites by any of the birthday girls, but I almost blacked out the board. So it was 4 prompts shy of having a blackout. So there's my completed board. So for Red, White, and June, okay, the prompts were for a fictional story set in the Revolutionary era, and that prompt come from Shannon from the Old American Spirit. I read Belle of Chatham for that prompt, and then for nonfiction about the Revolutionary era, that one came from Kelli Reads a Lot. I read 1776 and I Survived. Of course, you could also put the Declaration of Independence and Patrick Henry's speech under that one. Okay. Then I read Secrets or Spies for that prompt from Morgan's Endless Bookshelf. I read For Liberty and Love. Okay. From Tales with Tay, her prompt is Loyalist or Patriot. I read The Belle of Chatham. I put that one for hers. Okay. Quill and Parchment, that's Cheryl at Candlewick Library. That her prompt. I put the Hamilton biography there. Of course, that one would also work for the nonfiction as well, and we know. From Anne from In Search Her Wonder, her prompt was Faith That Endures. I put the Belle of Chatham book there as well. Okay, but the For Liberty and Love would also work there as well. And then Courage and Petticoat by Bethany Brings book, I put For Liberty and Love as under that prompt as well. So that was what I did for the readathon. Did you participate in any of these readathons? Let me know how you did. What was your reading like in June? I was reading pretty slowly in June, so I didn't really think that I would get to all of these books in June. But towards the end of the month, I kicked it into overdrive and got a lot of reading done. Please at least leave me an American flag or a picnic emoji in the comments, a food or a picnic emoji or an American flag emoji in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video. Y'all have a wonderful day. Read Brucey out. Did you